And if you wanna leave, I'll make it sure you have to crawl out. Lord Massacre just to get set to all out. By the time I'm finished, there'll be a fallout. And if all goes as planned, it ain't just me, we all out. What's up, my wizards? Dev from the place down there, and we got mono black triple tech finally today. There's so many cool things you can do for only like 10 bucks in mono black right this second. So let's go ahead and hit it because not much time. I gotta make this last less than 2 hours. Let's go. Deck number one. This is the thing that I've been talking about for a while, actually. This is mono black hilarity, we've been calling it, because all the stuff it does is just so darn hilarious. 27 creatures in this deck, which is an awful lot of creatures. That is more creatures than we're playing even in the aggro mono black thing. So yeah, we've got a lot of them, but they all do cool stuff for us, starting out with 4 copies of Ruthless Ripper. This is the common bond, the thread that connects all of the decks here today. 4 copies of Ruthless Ripper in all 3 of them, because this card is very good, especially from a budget player's standpoint, you know. Good as a turn 1 drop, good late in the game too. Essentially, you know, mid to late game it functions as a shock to the face, which is really, really good, especially in an aggro deck. And, you know, gums up the board so that we can play a little bit later. It plays good from an aggro standpoint, plays good from, you know, a defensive standpoint too. So I like everything about Ripper, and it does the things we need her to do in this deck, just like it does in all 3 of them, you know. We get a little bit later into the game because this gums up combat, especially against really good creatures. So, playing her. We're playing 3 copies of Blood-Soaked Champion, sort of a dream for a couple of these decks, honestly. This synergizes really well with a lot of stuff that we're doing in the deck, obviously. You know, we're playing Carsey Sadist, Merciless Executioner, Fleshbag Marauder, lots and lots of stuff, Grim Haruspex, so yeah. Pretty much synergizes very well with all of them being able to come back after being sacrificed or something like that, so really, really good. Gotta play it. 3 copies of Carsey Sadist in this thing. Sadist is super good. She started off as a 4 of it, to drop her down a little bit in the end though, but Carsey Sadist is awesome, it turns out. Again, synergizes really well with Blood-Soaked Champion, and synergizes well with some of our other creatures too, you know, and is a good blocker too in the early to mid-ish game. 4 copies of Merciless Executioner and 1 copy of Fleshbag Marauder. Yeah, we can play 5 of this guy, so we might as well, right? Yeah, a key, sort of a linchpin in the deck, you know. Really, really interesting card too. We don't have to sacrifice him or anything. We can sack our Blood-Soaked Champion. We can sack our Ruthless Ripper. That's not really important anymore. You know, lots of things we can do. Sack Dutiful Attendant, get something else back, you know. Lots of cool stuff. And Fleshbag Marauder, I like Merciless Executioner more because he's cooler, even though he does the exact same thing. We gotta have him to make this deck even a thing. This is a hilarious card, and gets through Hexproof and Indestructible and stuff like that too, so good. 4 copies of Deadbridge Shaman, as I've mentioned, the walking 2-for-1. Yeah, a lot of times, the goal with this at least, is to get it to trade with a creature in combat and make them discard a card. That's a 2-for-1, no matter what way you slice it. So, yeah, awesome. Has been good enough at least for a 4 of in the deck, because she often accomplishes her goal. They can no longer attack with smaller creatures while this is out. So, unless they want to discard, which they often do not. And against control, this is really good too. You know, if they want to remove it, it's going to cost them a card. That is bad. That is really bad for them. So Deadbridge Shaman has been nothing but good against a lot of the stuff in the format. 3 copies of Dutiful Attendant, something else that makes the deck tick. Yeah, Dutiful Attendant, when it dies, you get something else back. And a lot of the creatures in the deck either kill stuff when they come in via exploit, something like that, or die themselves. You know, Merciless Executioner. Not good enough for a 4 of or anything, but definitely good enough for the 3 of. You do want to see her, and she'll always get you something cool back. 2 copies, notice all the 3 drops in the deck, by the way, of Nantuko Husk. Yeah, another thing that just makes it tick. A lot of synergy in the deck, it turns out. We are fairly synergistic. I mean, really facilitates a lot of our tricks. I don't have to go on about it. I'm pretty sure you can see what I'm doing with the Husk here. And to finish out the 3 drops, and so also the creatures, 3 copies of Grim Haruspex, you heard me mention earlier. This is an absolute all-star in the deck, by the way. Like I said, a lot of our creatures kill something when they come in, or exploit, or something like that, so Grim Haruspex is really, really awesome. And if you have an Nantuko Husk out, these 2 are great. These guys are peanut butter and jelly, man. On to the spells, we're playing 10 of them. 2 copies of Duress. Go ahead and get that out of the way. We're not that worried about like mass removal and stuff, which is what we normally want to Duress out of their hand in a situation like this. But we're not as worried about it in this deck. We're fairly resilient. You know, we got our champion, we got our Dutiful Attendant, we got something else coming up in the spells that helps us out. So, you know, Duress isn't as needed, but it is still somewhat needed, obviously, you know, against control decks, and even some smaller decks, and are going to pick our dudes off early game. So, really want to at least play the 2. Let's go ahead and give you all our removal at the same time. We got 2 copies of Ultimate Price, 2 copies of Reeve's Soul, and 1 copy of Murderous Cut. Yeah, Murderous Cut, we're obviously taking advantage again of all the things that go to the graveyard in the deck. We're killing a lot of stuff. We're playing a lot of creatures, so there will be a lot of things in the graveyard. But there will be things in the graveyard. Don't worry about Murderous Cut. It's a really good card. Reeve's Soul, a better card than a lot of people have given it credit for so far. This is just really good as your 2-drop, basically, which we're not playing many 2-drops in the deck other than like Carsey Sadist, that's it. So this is just another 2-drop we can play to sort of time walk them in some instances. And there's a lot of things in this format that are 3 power or less that are incredibly impactful, and it will remain so post-rotation. So really, really like Reeve's Soul. And then, of course, you've got to play Ultimate Price, right? Please bring back Doomblade. If building these decks and looking at these spoilers has taught me anything, it's that if Wizards brings back Doomblade, I will rejoice, because it can kill Eldrazi. That's really, really cool, and a needed safety valve for the format against those cards, and would just be the best budget thing ever for removal. We've got to have it. Please bring back Doomblade. 3 copies of Macabre Waltz in the deck. Macabre Waltz is awesome in something like this, especially, and both of those guys are going to have sweet value, It's going to be Merciless Executioner, we get to kill something, maybe another Deadbridge Shaman, make him discard a card, Dutiful Attendant after it's already gotten something back, so we can get something else back. It's just everything we can get back with Macabre Waltz is awesome. The card works very well. This is the deck for this card. Playing 23 Swamps in the deck. I don't really need to talk too much about that. It was 24. We can get by on 23. We're mono-color. We're not playing anything over 3 mana. We can be totally fine on that. These are your power rankings right here. A final score of 53, mostly due to the resiliency and synergy numbers, Very good numbers in those categories, but it doesn't do a whole lot else well. The problem with the deck is that it lacks a sort of a finishing punch. It doesn't finish well in any way, and that can be an issue, even though we're playing an abundance of creatures, and mtgo Husk can be a good finisher in some situations, but only in some situations, We often don't empty the board. We can take care of some of the bigger threats on the board, sure, but we often will not keep the board empty, which can be a problem, especially considering, mtgo Husk can only take us so far, and we've got to deal sort of smaller damage with our smaller dudes in order to end the game. So we have a problem in the end game, but we do very well in the mid game. Turns out. One more thing before I move on. This deck will cost you about $6 to make. I think $6.50 on TCG Player. A heck of a deal, by the way. For the price of lunch, you can have yourself a nice little mono black deck that plays really, really well at things like FNMs and smaller formats and things like that. I really do like this deck. Deck number 2. This is actually my favorite out of the 3, although a lot of people will, I think, enjoy the 3rd one. We are doing a mid-range deck, our last deck, an aggro deck, this deck, and a control deck. So, this is our aggro deck. This is mono black 1-drops. Now, we are playing some things that don't cost just the 1 mana. We are very focused on cards that just cost the 1. So let's hit you with the creatures. We're playing 4 copies of Ruthless Ripper. I don't have to talk too much about her. Same things I said in the last deck apply here, especially even more so for this deck, because we're running very aggro, and our ability to shock to the face on the 3rd to 5th turn, or whenever you drop her late game, really good. I should have just said this too. We're playing 4 copies of Typhoid Rats. A really, really good black 1-drop for the same reasons as Ripper, except that it's not great in longer games, but really, really good at the beginning of the game, especially with some of the stuff we're doing with our suite of spells here. 4 copies of Mardu Shadow Spear, something that helps us not have to worry so much about sorcery speed removal, which people will be playing with cards like Ruinous Path. That's going to be a card. And mass removal, like Languish and stuff like that. Very important card for the deck, and often just does 2 damage. And it's really cool to get that guaranteed 1 damage on the swing in too. That's awesome. 4 copies of Blood-Soaked Champion. I was going to say a playset, a Blood-Soaked Champion in the deck. Yeah, super, super, super important to help us go a little bit longer. We will be attacking all the time, so Blood-Soaked Champion. Important card. 3 copies of Mardu Skull Hunter in the deck. Again, we'll be attacking all the time. This is really good against control decks especially, so that we can force them to discard maybe a removal piece, maybe a land drop that they need. There's lots of things. Just any card in their hand is important if they're playing control. So really, really awesome against those decks specifically, and even good against some of the bigger decks we see in the format. Force them to discard either a land or a big creature, so good card. 4 copies of Carsey Sadist in this deck. Yeah, another thing that just helps us deal that little bit of extra damage and is a good blocker against decks that go a little bit bigger than us in the mid game, which is important to have, But we'll have something to exploit all the time. We're playing a ton of 1-drops, and Blood-Soaked Champion, again, exploits very well here. And 1 copy of Gurmag Angler to finish the creatures off. Yeah, this is a 1-drop, it turns out. Even with Blood-Soaked Champion in the deck, we're still going to have a ton of creatures and even spells in our graveyard at all times. So something like Gurmag Angler is really good. It's the biggest body we can possibly play for such a low cost, and in a budget deck too. So really want to play at least the 1 copy. I could see if you wanted to play 2 or even 3. The card is really, really good. 16 spells in the deck, and it wouldn't be this deck if I didn't go ahead and say we're playing a playset of Foul-Tongued Shriek. We plan to be attacking with a lot of dudes, so this can go a long way to dealing an extra 3, 4, even later game 5 damage to the opponent, and really help finish the game out. You know, a lot of the times this is a Stoke the Flames or a Lightning Strike to the face, you know. The card has been nothing but good in testing. People keep telling me to try it out, and I just never did, but in this deck, it's ideal. The deck for this card. 3 of the weirdest card in any of these decks. In all 3 of the decks, this is the weirdest card. 3 Touch of Moonglove. If you don't notice, we are doing with like Ruthless Ripper, Carsey Sadist, Touch of Moonglove. We're doing damage outside of our creatures, and Foul-Tongued Shriek. We're doing damage outside of our creatures to help sort of lower the gap, lessen the gap, you know, because we're not going to deal all of our damage by combat damage alone. We can't win the game that way because all of our creatures are so low to the ground. So we've got to have something like Foul-Tongued Shriek and something like Touch of Moonglove, Carsey Sadist to deal a few extra incremental damage, and dealing just, you know, 4 to 6 damage with cards like that over the course of the game can often be a deal breaker. 4 copies of Molting Snakeskin in the deck. Molting Snakeskin is super awesome, you know. Having 3 mana really allows a lot of our creatures to, again, be resilient, stick around through mass removal and things like that, especially Crux of Fate, you know, End Hostilities. Doesn't work against Languish, but still. And in the early game, you know, second turn, we can often play another creature after our 1-drop, and then put this on our 1-drop, start swinging in for decent damage, you know. This works really, really well on death-touching creatures, too. So I've loved Molting Snakeskin. Obviously, you're asking for a 2-for-1. Your creatures are going to die anyway, but this helps prevent against a 2-for-1 in a lot of ways, you know. And it's not that hard to leave mana up late game for this, because you can leave mana up for this and still play other things, you know, because almost everything costs 1 or 2 mana. Molting Snakeskin's awesome. 2 Ultimate Price and a Murderous Cut in the deck. Murderous Cut works even better in this deck. You know, a lot of our dudes will be going to the graveyard over the course of the game, and Murderous Cut helps us take out the thing that took them all out. So, Revenge, the Murderous Cut, and obviously Ultimate Price, because it's straight up removal. We're also playing 2 copies of Macabre Waltz in this deck. Macabre Waltz is great. Macabre Waltz is really everything that it was in the last deck, you know. Macabre Waltz just helps us get the dudes back that, again, are guaranteed to go to the graveyard. And we're playing 20 Swamps in the deck. Just 20, that's totally fine. A lot of these mono red aggro decks will play like 18 Mountain, they're totally fine. We are doing some things like wanting to regenerate our creatures with Snakeskin. We want to play more than 1 card a turn a lot of the time, you know. So we don't need our mana. We obviously want to get 2 mana for Bloodsoaked Champion. We got to get that back. So the deck is hungry in some ways, but not much. We can get by on 20 lands very easily. And here are your power rankings. A final score of 55 for the deck. Again, for almost no money, you can do some really, really good things in mono black. And this is, again, my favorite deck. Super, super speedy. I like playing aggro, especially with tricks like Foul-Tongued Shriek up our sleeve. That card is very good. It turns out just wins games out of nowhere for you, you know, and opponents have to fear it after they realize you're playing it. So, second game, people are very wary of Foul-Tongued Shriek. And just the deck does a lot of stuff good. It does a lot of stuff poorly, too. It's not very defense-oriented after the 4th or 5th turn. If you haven't won yet, or at least put them at 2 or 3 life, you're in some trouble. But again, things like Carsey Sadist, Ruthless Ripper, and a couple of the other cards we're playing, you know, Touch of Moonglove, they essentially focus, they function as burn late in the game, and the same principle burn applies, you know. Get them down to 2 to 4 life, hope to draw your burn to finish out the game. That's exactly what this deck does. And finally, this is mono black control right here. Yeah, I got it. The time's probably running out, so I'm going to get through it. Again, we're playing 4 copies of Ruthless Ripper among our 16 creatures here in this deck. Ruthless Ripper, again, for this deck especially, just helps us get through to the long game, which is very, very important. We got to do that. 3 copies of Merciless Executioner in this deck as well, again, because it helps us get to the late game. Kills things that we couldn't otherwise kill, you know, with targeted removal and stuff like that. That's awesome. And Merciless Executioner is just going to be good almost any stage of the game, which is what a control deck wants. Love the card. 1 copy of Risen Executioner. Risen Executioner has been really, really good, especially against control decks. It's good to have a recursive threat that we can always get back, and actually has a pretty good body on it too. So, you know, just 5 swings with this, we will win the game against the starting life total, and control really fears something like that. You know, we've got a lot of things that delve in the deck so that we can mitigate the idea of having to, you know, pay extra mana for him out of the graveyard. We won't have to do that too often because of a couple of the things we're doing in the deck. So the card has been really good, even as just a 1-of in the deck, and we are playing things that fetch it up if that's what we need at the time. So love the Risen Executioner in this thing. It turns out he's been really good. He also, before I move on, pumps a few of our creatures, so that's cool too. Playing 2 Priest of the Bloodright in this deck. I just really love the card. Wanted to make it work, and it does work pretty well in the deck. There's a couple of ways that we can get rid of the Priest after it's in play, and that's pretty important for us. But just having the 5/5 flying token is crazy. That's awesome. Finishes out the game, you know. I told you the first deck doesn't finish well. The second deck doesn't do well in the mid-range. This deck finishes pretty well because we're playing a lot of high-end threats. We just have to get there, which the deck also does fairly well. 2 copies of Archfiend of Depravity because the card is awesome, especially against, you know, heavy creature-based decks, obviously, tokens decks, obviously. Seeing a lot of Thopters in the format. Hangerback Walker is a thing, you know. There's just a lot of things that Archfiend works really well against, and is a 5-power flying body while we're at it. Love Archfiend. 1 copy of Guiltleaf Winnower in the deck. You'll see why we're playing these 1 and 2 ofs very soon here, don't worry, because I know a lot of people are like, what are all those? They're called silver bullets, and there's a reason for that. Guiltleaf Winnower takes out the Rhino, which is super important. A 4-power body with Menace is really good against a lot of decks, it turns out. So Winnower has been nothing but good. She's a fairly recent addition to the deck, too. But since I've started playing her, she's been awesome, especially, again, against the Rhino. We gotta have something to take out the Rhino more reliably because it's probably the most important creature in the format. We're playing 1 copy, so far, just the 1, of Sidisi Undead Vizier. Just crazy, right? I mean, we have to play this in a mono black control. Fetches up whatever we want. Exploits pretty well, you know. We can exploit the Priest of the Bloodright, an old Ruthless Ripper. Lots and lots of stuff, so don't worry about that. Mercilessly Risen Executioner we can exploit, and he can just come right back. So lots of cool stuff, interactions with Sidisi there. And it fetches up whatever we want, and is a 4/6 Death Touch body on her own, so yes. And to finish off the creatures here, 2 copies of Gurmag Angler. Gurmag Angler is awesome in this. Again, something that helps us delve away unneeded creatures so that we can easily cast Risen Executioner out of the graveyard, and is a 5/5 body. I can't stress that enough. This is like a mini Tasigur. If you don't have the dollars for Tasigur, this will work somewhat fine, although you don't get all the awesome, you know, mini factor fiction value out of it, which that's what Tasigur's awesome for. But Tasigur's also awesome because he's a, you know, 2 or 3 mana a lot of the time, 4-power body, and this is a 5-power body for 2 or 3 mana a lot of the time, and sometimes even 1. Angler's good. 19 spells in the deck because we're playing control. We're playing 3 copies of Duress and 2 copies of Despise in this deck. This is the deck for Despise, I would say. We do want to get rid of huge creatures, which will be even more of a problem after rotation, I would say, just based on some of the spoilers we've seen. And Duress is always good, not just against opposing control decks to get the counters out of their hand, which we don't have any of, but also to get the mass removal out because we are playing some creatures we want to keep on the board. There's lots of functions for Duress. Here's some removal. 3 copies of Reeve's Soul, 2 copies of Ultimate Price, and 1 copy in the main deck, get ready for it, of Self-Inflicted Wound, which has been crazy. Again, we have got to take out Siege Rhino, and this does even more than that. Den Protector, Death Misraptor, Dragon Lord Atarka, a million other cards that I could name this takes out. So, yes, I mean, mono white mid-range is a thing now, you know. Sam Black piloted that to, what, 3rd place at Worlds, so that's an important deck now. Lots and lots of white creatures, lots and lots of green creatures that are very, very important in this format. Enough for me to main deck one of these, definitely. Here's some more removal. 1 copy of Deathwind, and I wanted to showcase that specifically because the card has been way, way, way better than I thought it was going to be at first, you know. Often this cost us 2 or 3 mana to take out a guy. That's it. That's it. Especially in the early game. And this works against indestructible guys. This works against things like, you know, Planeswalker Gideon when he's a creature, when he becomes a creature. This works against regular Gideon when he's still a creature and decides to become indestructible. Deathwind, and that's only 2 mana. Like, Deathwind has been really, really good against a lot of the stuff I test against, and yeah, it's 6 mana to take out of Siege Rhino, whatever. And late in the game, that's doable, by the way, especially at instant speed. But Deathwind has been good in nearly every situation. For as much as 4, maybe 5 mana, we can take out almost anything in the format if it doesn't have hexproof. 2 copies of Crux of Fate, the most budget mass removal we could possibly play right now. The advent of Languish has really driven down the price of Crux of Fate, which wasn't all that high to begin with, surprisingly. Drove it from like $3.50 down to $1.50. So really good. Scoop them up while you can because that is a great price for a card like this. To finish off the spells here, we're playing 3 copies of Dark Petition, which makes the deck tick. On TCG Player, you can get these for about 60 cents right now. That is a heck of a deal. I really, really like Dark Petition, and everything I've tested it in, this is like a 3rd time I played it, really makes the deck tick, allows us to play a lot of these 1-ofs, and a lot of these spells in our deck we can play if we have Spell Mastery immediately. You know, any of the removal that we're playing in the deck, we can play immediately. Most of the removal, at least. And it's just been super awesome. Allows us to play less copies of some cards that we don't want to see all the time. You know, I want to see Dark Petition all the time. All the time. 25 lands. We are playing 4 Evolving Wilds and 21 Swamp. We're not playing that many 1-drops. We're not playing that many 2-drops outside of removal. So it's good to play Evolving Wilds so that we can get our Delve machine going. That's pretty important because we're playing a few cards with Delve in the deck. Here are your power rankings. The highest power ranking by 1 point. 56 points for this deck just because, you know, it lacks a little bit in some departments that just aren't important for a control deck, but isn't as good as other control decks in the places a control deck should be good in. But again, for 10 bucks, how much can you really be asking? I mean, you know, against Esper Dragons and things like, you know, other control decks, this will struggle a little bit because it gets outclassed. And against some other things, it will get outclassed. But controls, or plays like a control deck very, very well, you know, drop a huge guy after we've taken control of the game, remove early threats, and hold back removal for later threats. We're playing mass removal, we're playing, you know, discard and stuff like that. So functions really well for 10 bucks as a control deck. I actually think this deck is really, really good. I would take it up to F&M. Honestly, this is the one deck that I would really suggest for F&M. I mean, all 3 of them work pretty well in a smaller environment, you know, but this is the one that I think will have the most success in an environment like that and can be improved on with a few dollars pretty easily, I would say. So, like the deck a whole heck of a lot. Let me know what you guys think, because I think this is one of the better budget decks that we've made in a long time. Well, that's all I got. I don't know if that took an hour or what, but yeah, that's all I got. I have no idea what we're doing next time. I'm taking suggestions. I'm leaning towards mono red post rotation for maybe 20 bucks, something like that. Let me know how you feel. I've gotten a lot of calls from mono red lately. But I got to wrap it up. I'm Dev from SPMTG. If you enjoyed the content, like, share, comment, subscribe. It all does us so much help, and we're trying to grow. I appreciate all of you guys watching, man. Thanks for watching, my wizards. I have to end on that tagline.